to the Servants of Hope Kingdom Ministry, Speaking Your Truth. Today, we have a special guest, Simone Pollard. Simone, thank you for inviting us into your home. It was an honor to just come in here and just sit down and actually you fixed food for us, and it was just wonderful. I am so full. I hope I can make it through this interview. but I just thank you. We just want to give you thank you for that. So now I'm going to turn it over to our co-host, and she will take it from here.
All
Minister
right.
Tasha.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. Well, hello, Miss Simone. So good to see you again. And I want to ask you a few questions. One of the first ones that I want to ask is, tell us where you're from and how you got here to Texas.
Well, our whole family actually is from the Connecticut area. My father was in the military, and we were going back and forth, and he was stationed in Fort Hood, and they just happened to be in the Austin area when I was about to be born, and ended up here. So I was born in Austin. We went back to the East Coast, then had to come back down this way when he decided he wanted to stay here. So pretty much from junior high school till now, I've been in the Austin area. Went to school here, went to college in Prairie View A&M University in Texas, and just decided after I was studying to be an architect student that really wasn't what I wanted to do. Ended up working with kids. That was what my passion was, and ended up working with the City of Austin Parks and Recreation, and I'm still there 23 years later. Just because I enjoy what I do.
Yes.
All right. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about what school was like, what college was like. What was that journey like for you?
It was different. I grew up going to schools where I was the only minority kid amongst everyone else. And I never thought about it. It was never a question of black and white for me. Because I lived in a household where my parents taught me that everybody was the same, because we had a multicultural family. So I never thought of myself as the black kid, as people would say. So I went to a private school. I went to Sacred Heart. I was the only minority there. Later on, I went to Pecan Springs Elementary, and oddly enough, I was kind of somewhat the minority in that classroom because there were Hispanic children and not a lot of black children. We were there, but not in my particular classroom. So I ended up going to Pierce Junior High School, and that was the first place where I actually was around a whole bunch of other black students. So it was different. I adjusted. It wasn't like a big deal because, like I said, we never focused on race. It was just different cultures do things differently. So you learn the good habits and the bad habits. You learn it all.
Exactly.
And so when I went to college, I started off at HT, went to University of North Texas, and then ended up at Prairie View. And kind of wanted to go to Prairie View because I wanted to go to a historical black college. That's what I wanted to do. And I studied architecture. And again, it was different. We had a lot of students that were from different cities, different places, and I must honestly say that Austin, Texas has its own culture. It's different from a lot of other Texas cities, and we don't do the things the same way as like people in Dallas or in Houston. So I learned a lot of things from other people from those areas, Houston and Dallas, and I learned how to dance. I learned because I wasn't in that in that arena. What I call dancing was obviously not the right kind of dancing. But
what dancing was that?
Well, I went to Austin High School, so we did a lot of jumping around and some jerking here and there, and that was not dancing. Obviously, I found out. So I learned how to dance, really dance. I learned how to appreciate African American music. And it opened the doors to a whole bunch of different things.
So,
Should you dance now?
Oh yeah.
The right hand.
You know what? I do that right dance, and I even do the other kind of right dancing for Jesus. I do it all. I like to dance. I like to dance. Yes, I do.
Amen. Yeah. You know, my kids went to Pecan Springs Elementary.
Ain't that something?
Yeah.
And that school's an old
I
alma
remember
mater,
that
I
school.
tell you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been here forever. That's an old school. Yeah, it's been around, but it's still
Mhm.
there.
You talked about being a minority, the only person of color in your classroom. What other experiences can you tell us about being a minority?
Yeah. So, I in the neighborhood that I grew up in, my parents bought a house on a street where there were no other colored people. There was a black family that moved in later, but in the beginning, we were the only ones there. And when I was 7 years old, I was playing in a dirt pile with a whole bunch of kids. And a little Anglo kid, he just decided that I was different and he didn't like me. And he took a digging hoe and split my head in half. And my some kind of way, I don't know, because I was just laying there in the dirt. Some kind of way, my father came to me, grabbed me, was holding my head together, put me in the car, and we drove to the hospital. And they stitched me all back up together. And man say one thing, but God says another.
Yes.
They were saying I was had mental problems, I was memory loss, just all kind of things. And my mother prayed. My mom was a praying mother, and my grandmother even more so than her. And they prayed, and I came out fine. I had stitches for a long time, but here I am today. I don't have any mental problems that I know of. I might be a little crazy to others, but I'm all right, you know.
God's grace is sufficient.
Yeah, amen. So I'm good. But I that was one incident. Another incident was when I got a little older. I was riding my bike, same neighborhood, going around the corner, and guy was in his yard. Anglo guy was in his yard, and he swung an axe at me. And I don't know. The angels just told me to duck, and when I ducked, that axe went over my head.
Oh my God!
And there was another neighbor across the street. He ran over there to where I was, and I guess he spooked this guy because he ran into his house, and he came over there to me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." I was crying, and he said, "Don't ever come down this street." And I said, "Okay," and I don't go down that street.
Wow.
I do not go down that street even today, but it just it opened my eyes to a lot of things, a lot of hate. But I think for me, as a person that I am, I've learned to love people for who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that if I hadn't gone through those situations, I wouldn't appreciate people the way that I do. I wouldn't love people the way that I do, because I think the only way that we can get away from that hate from other people is to learn to love one another. And that's what I really, really focus on when it comes to other people. I don't care what color you are. I don't care how you smell. I don't care how you look. I want to love on you. I want to appreciate you for you just being you and who you are. And I don't judge people.
So, Simone, about how old were you when that happened?
I was about that second incident. I was probably about maybe 9 or 10, because it was shortly after the first incident.
9 or 10 years old.
Yeah. And the Holy Spirit just said duck, and I did.
So did your parents ever know about that situation? Or?
Oh yeah, I went home and told my mom. I was like, "Mom, this man just swung an axe at me," and she was upset, but my mom had a mean streak, but she also had a coolness about her. And she had told me, she said, "We're not going to go and we're not going to confront that man because you don't know what people are going to do."
Right.
But she said, "I hope that this allows you to see how people treat other African American people." She told me I needed to be exposed to that. I needed to experience that. Because she told me growing up in her lifetime, she went through a lot more things than that.
Wow.
So she let me know she's been through some stuff. So she said I needed to experience that.
Well, mine experience, but not with no ex.
It was an ex.
Man.
He was. I'll never forget it. He was cutting some trees or bushes or something, and I was coming down the sidewalk on my bike, and the chain on my bike had got like tripped up or fell off or whatever, and I had to stop. And I was trying to fix that chain. I wasn't even bothering that man, but I was kind of like halfway in front of his house, and he came to me and he asked me something like, "What are you doing here?" or something like that. And I was trying to tell him that my bike was messed up, and he took that axe and he swung it at me, and I just ducked. And when I ducked, the other guy was across the street. He was gardening in his yard, and I guess he saw it or he heard it or something, and he just came running across the street, coming to me. And he told me, he said, "Don't ever come down this street again." It was another white guy. And I said, "Okay, I won't." And I went home.
Yeah.
I went home and I told my mom.
Yeah. And it just seems like the hatred has kind of morphed into something else.
Oh yeah.
And you know, there will someday be a time when we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
You know, because that's one of my greatest fears for my kids, and I'm sure you know we all have that same fear for our kids.
Yeah.
And we don't want them to experience anything like that, but we know it's almost inevitable.
Yeah.
Some kind of way of form.
Yeah.
You talked about your passion. You went to school for architect, but
Not what I wanted to do. Yeah.
tell us about that.
I've always had a love for other people. That's just kind of my thing. And when I had graduated college, it was kind of like, okay, now what you gonna do? And I didn't really have a plan. So after I graduated college, I got married, and my husband, he worked for the city, and he said, "Well, you should try to work for the city." And I was thinking to myself, "You're a trash man. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna go down the street and be picking up trash." And he was like, "No, the city has all kind of things you can do." So I started looking into it, and I ran across Parks and Recreation, and I was like, that sounds interesting. What do they do? And I met a young lady that already worked for the city for Parks and Rec, and I love to do community events, so I helped her do a community event, and after that I fell in love with it. I really did. I applied to work at Alamo Recreation Center, and that's where my career started.
Wow.
It started at Alamo. I started working with kids, working with seniors. I loved it, and I just said, this is what I want to do, and I've done it ever since.
Awesome. You know, this platform is open to women who share their truth. And one of the questions we want to leave you with, and that one question is, what kind of advice or what would you say to young women around the world today about, you know, facing or telling your truth, coming through traumatic situations?
It's important to love yourself. And a lot of times we say we love ourselves, but we really don't. When you love yourself, you're not ashamed of what you do or how you do it. You're bold about who you are, and you could care less what other people think. I think that's important. I think we all need to get to that point where quit trying to impress one another.
Yes.
I think that's our problem as women. We're trying to outdo one another. We want to have the best pair of shoes. We want to have the biggest houses. We want to have the finest cars. That stuff don't matter in God's eyes. He cares about your spirit and who you are. And I think that's the place where we need to be. We need to be more concerned about how we treat one another, how we love on one another. I think that's what's important. Once you learn to love yourself, then you can love somebody else. We rush to get in relationships that are no good. We rush to develop friendships that are toxic. And we haven't taken the time to develop ourselves. So I think that would be my advice to any woman. Learn to love yourself, and then you can love somebody else.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Go ahead, Trey.
My turn. Simone, when I first met you, um, you were like, you are a woman of God. More or less, I see you in the servant part of your woman of God. You serve gracefully. Um, but I do know that you are a minister. But you don't let that stop you from serving. Every time I see you, you're doing something in the community. You're going to the nursing home. You just always busy doing something. Me and Minister Tashawn, we talking about, Lord, where did she get her strength from? She's just traveling from this place to this place, but you don't rest.
Yes.
And if anybody should call you, I do know that you will, at your best, try to make sure that their need is met before you lay down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that is really good. But I really want to know about when you were called into the ministry and how it was, because women are not accepted into the ministry. So just share that with us a little bit.
I had been a teacher for a long time. Sunday school teacher, youth church teacher, just teacher. And would always tell people, because they would accidentally say Minister Simone. I said, no, I'm just a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met a young lady from my church that was a minister. And I had went to a revival with her one night. And God spoke to me during that revival. I mean, to the point where I had tunnel vision and all I could see was him.
Mm.
And all he did was point to me and just said, you. And I swear, I broke down, I cried and fell out and everything else. And the next thing I know, they picking me up off the floor. So and so I left that revival and I told my friend, I said, God had just called me to preach. And I told her, I said, God, I don't want to do that. And she said, it seemed like you've been running from it though for a long time. And I said, well, I've never had him just come to me directly, like that. That was the first time God had just ever came to me directly and said, point blank, you. So I knew what the call was, and I went and told my mom, and my mom was just like, well, I knew one day it was going to happen because I just know you. It was bound to happen. It was coming anyway. And so she told me, she said, now you got to go tell your pastor. I was like, oh, great. Now I was going to a church at a time that did not have women ministers, didn't believe in women ministry, none of that. Mm-hmm. So I go and I tell them, and they totally just denied what I said. I think the response was because I told them I'd been called to preach, but I felt more like a prophetess. I think that was the word I used, and basically he told me that prophetess is not in the Bible. And I went, what? Because I know I had read the Bible a couple of times and saw prophetess in there a whole bunch of times, but that was his way of saying that there are no women ministers. And so I decided then that was not the place for me. So I left that church and I went to another church. And the second church I had chosen, I based it on the fact that they had women ministers and that they nurtured the ministers. Right. They actually taught the ministers. They studied with the ministers. They developed the ministers. And I went there and I started working with the children. But then I found my new love, which was women. That was my ministry right there. Yeah. So I started working with women's ministry and found that that's really one of the places God had called me to be at. So once I left that church and I ended up at New Hope, I've always had that passion to have a ministry for women and ministry for children, and that's what I do. I know what my purpose is. A lot of times people don't know what their calling is. I know what mine is. So I try to walk in it. I try to do it the way God has called me to do it because I know what it is and I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I try to do that. And, and a lot of times it's hard because you'd much rather be doing something else. being real.
Yeah.
I would also love to be doing something else, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't because
Yeah.
I gotta be. That part of me says I have to be obedient to His word, and I have to do what He's told me to do. I can't deny it. I mean, even down to the children that I've raised. I've raised so many.
Yeah.
You know, the women that I've nurtured. I mean, I'm a mother to so many.
Yes.
And I wouldn't. The blessings that I've received from that, I would have never received them if I hadn't been obedient to God.
Yeah. Simone, I have a passion for women, and it's a strong passion. And y'all two sitting right here. When y'all came into New York, I reached out. I don't have a problem asking no woman to do something in the kingdom of God.
Yeah, you don't. Not at all.
So that's the reputation that I have. Is that I'm gonna always look for somebody to come with me to do the work, and it is with women. It is with women. So that is my passion, and so every time I get a chance, I'm gonna invite a woman to something, or try to get them involved in something, and hear their story. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. Awesome. That was awesome. Well, Minister Simone, thank you for joining Servants of Hope Kingdom Ministry. It was a pleasure today to be in the presence of your home. And we thank you for inviting us to your home to do this interview. Actually, this is our first mobile interview. Hey! Look, won't you do it? So that's all I have. Thank you. But I'm going to turn it back over to Minister Simone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simone, for being transparent and sharing your truth with us. We know that a lot of women will be blessed and inspired by your story. Amen.
Thank you for joining in Service of Hope Kingdom Ministry. Hope to see you soon. This is Titi.